All right, guys, congratulations. You made it to the weekend. Funny how Friday sometimes feels like Mondays in this COVID era, but we're going to hop into the mailbag. We're going to be discussing the Retirement Savers Credit today. This will not disappoint. Welcome to the ultimate crowdsourced personal finance show. This is your Friday Roundup.
You're listening to ChooseFI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. ChooseFI, your home for financial independence online.
Guys, excited to hop into this. To help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan. I am doing quite well. Yeah, it's hard to believe it is the end of May already. Time is kind of in a bit of a vortex here, but yeah, end of May, summer's on the horizon. It's pretty wild.
Do you remember when you were optimistic for 2020? Oh, you naive person, you. What do you have to show for 2020? COVID.
Yeah. Oh, it's hard to believe. Hard to believe. But so Memorial Day weekend we just had passed. Did you have any sense of normalcy? Did you guys grill out or do anything fun?
We kind of did a social distancing get together in our cul-de-sac. We're starting to slowly kind of loosen the reins around the household a little bit. And our neighbors and us just kind of like in the cul-de-sac congregated just a little bit, keeping the right amount of distance. But we ended up, there was some grilling out. There was lots of sparkling water. My son calls it cold water. That's, yeah. And, Brad, we made one of the Barrett top 50 recipes.
Ooh, do tell. Which one was it?
So I bought the ingredients for two of them. So I went through the list. There's about, what are there, about 20 or so, actually 20 to 30 of them uploaded on ChooseFI.com/meals right now. I went through and I grabbed two of them, went to the grocery store to go get those items. The first ones I started with was spicy chicken tortilla dish. I have two kids under the age of 3, so we kind of left the spice part to the side. I used half serving of the cayenne that I called for. And then the ginger, what was it? Ginger chicken Thai wraps, I think. That one's teed up for later on this week, but I can give you feedback on the spicy chicken tortilla dish. Man, that thing is good. And it's definitely in my top 50 as well.
Nice. Yeah, it's that's funny. That is one that Laura has not made in our house in quite some time, but I think it's got to go back to the top of the list here. Give me a quick, so I'm looking at the recipe and I'm envisioning it, but tell me about it.
You know, what's interesting about this is that you know that I'm actually doing this health challenge right now. It's a 6-month health challenge. I plan on losing somewhere around 30 pounds over the next 6 months. I'm about 10 pounds down right now, so I'm 1/3 of the way there. And what I love about the recipes that you're included is they all meet my criteria, right? Non-processed, cooked at home, great ingredients, and delicious, right? So we made this one over the weekend, and basically what we're talking about, this is a casserole. This is effectively a casserole, and it's got the core ingredients are rotisserie chicken. It's got heavy cream in there. It's got cheese, scallions, which a lot of us, once we get out of the grocery store, just refer to them as green onions. And let's see, I think there's a few other ingredients. But I mean, what's amazing about this is truly, Brad, this is what we're seeing with the Barrett Top 50. Love the naming, by the way. Not only are these easily falling inside the $2 per person per meal kind of constraints that we've applied here, but they're so good. And I'm able to achieve my health and fitness goals while consuming them. I feel like so many people say, oh yeah, well you could eat cheap, but you got to set your health to the side of the road to do that. That's crazy. That's a limiting belief. I'm going to prove it out by using those meals over the course of this health journey that I'm on.
Yeah, that's super cool. And yeah, just to give some context here for new listeners is we've been talking about this mythical Barrett top 50 list of recipes that basically my wife, Laura, she loves to cook. It's like one of her absolute passions, but she doesn't love cooking for hours. She doesn't love recipes with 50 different ingredients that are all obscure. She likes cooking delicious meals that are pretty easy to make and are easily able to double or even triple, right? She doesn't want to be standing over the stove for an hour 7 days a week, right? That is not her ideal world. So basically, she's been curating, and we basically, with my stomach and her cooking ability, we've been. Laura likes to joke that I have 2 different results from a recipe. It's either an A+ or it's like a D minus. So
it's either great or it sucks.
yeah, that about covers it. So yeah, I mean, we have been curating this top 50 list, and for the last, pretty much our whole marriage. I mean, the last 10 to 15 years at this point, and we're finally getting around to putting them on the website, right? We've been talking about this for 3.5 years, and it's kind of cool to see it actually come to fruition. So, it's funny because while these are our top 50, like I said, even this tortilla chip casserole, we haven't had probably in, 8 to 12 months. So it's cool to actually see them on the website and have all the ingredients there listed. And doesn't it like interacts with some apps, right? Is that
Yeah. Our listeners were the first to inform me that the recipes were amazing, but they couldn't use them with their recipe scrapers. There are a bunch of meal planning apps and recipe scrapers that are out there. And when we first upload them, they were just pretty text, right? Pretty text and pictures, and you could download it and you make the meal like you would imagine. But we live in 2020, man. This is a world of technology. You have apps that can download these recipes and pull them into your app and create your shopping list and have your directions right there on your phone or your iPad when you're making it. And there was a technology hurdle for us to figure out what the heck we were doing because we're a personal finance website, right? And so now all of that is in place, and I can verify I used my preferred meal scraping app, which was recommended to us by a listener called Paprika. And I use that to make this. So if you have a meal planning app that you use and that's how you go about getting recipes, then it will work now. Having said that, I should just say, I realize that not everybody does this. In fact, you, Brad, will probably never be convinced to download a meal recipe app. So for you, and everybody else that identifies with you, you can just go to ChooseFI.com/meals. You can access all the recipes. They're entirely free, and you can download them just as a digital download there as well. So you can have all of that just easy to access at your convenience.
Yeah, and just last word in this is Laura's dad loves to refer to it as fine dining with a capital F-I, right? So it's F-I, fine dining, because, delicious meals, super easy to make, right around that $2 per person per meal. And I mean, it's a win. So yeah, definitely check it out. And Jonathan, I think in the next batch, we've got rigatoni with red peppers, almonds, and breadcrumbs coming out in the recipe list. We're releasing these like kind of 10 at a time as our team can put them together. It's really laborious, obviously. This is one of my favorite things ever. So definitely put that on the short list.
Brad, let's give them the soapbox rant about curation here, right? Like volume versus curation. Like if you're going to go, you could go scour the internet for a million recipes. Why should you just start by going to ChooseFI.com/meals?
Yeah, I think curation is probably the perfect word, because there are tens of thousands of recipes, right? Like you can find recipes falling out of hundreds of different cookbooks and recipe books and websites, right? Like that's the easy part. I think the hard part is actually finding out, is this something I can do? Am I going to need obscure ingredients? Is it going to taste good, or is it going to be a disaster? Is it going to be able to make leftovers, or am I going to have to toss them because they taste terrible or they're not reheated? Like I said, Laura and I have spent 10 plus years trying to get a list of recipes that we can just make for the next, couple decades of our marriage. And so far, these are the top 50. And the cool thing is, like, as new ones come in, like this, Jonathan, this has always been my thing, is like, it'll kind of like supplant number 50, like
which
as a new one comes in, right?
Yeah,
now I've got to order them, which we can crowdsource the ordering here.
I think I should have some sort of input in the ordering. Like you set the 50, but I just want, like, it's a voting process. Members who have made the meals can vote on them. And then inside the top 50, so the Barretts decide what's in the top 50. Myself and the community rank them, and it'll be something along those lines. What do you think?
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I'm in.
Okay. We'll have to figure out a voting process for this, but you only get to vote if you've actually tried it. And to say, and let me add one more thing to this, Brad. I was so inspired by what you guys have done on front loading the work on this and this curation process. I've also decided to commit to making the recipes into video, so YouTube recipes as well. And so I went ahead and documented the process of making this spicy chicken tortilla, and I can confirm the recipes were simple and easy to find. I remember I checked out this other one that I'm making later on this week, and what I loved about it is the initial recipe that kind of inspired this was asking for something like Boston lettuce and some crazy Similac chili paste. Like, who the heck knows what this is? I don't want to go to the grocery store and find those. Laura very conveniently has laid out, all right, for the every person, right? Everybody out there who has no idea what those terms are, here's what you're practically going to substitute. And so you're not going to interact with these recipes and be like, really? Really? I need to go to aisle 27B and look on the bottom right-hand side or ask them to special order something. We won't do that to you, right? Anyways, we're gonna come back here. We spend a lot of time on ChooseFI.com/meals. Definitely, we're spending the time on it because it's worth your time. There's money to be saved here, hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars a month. This is a no-brainer. I doubled the recipe of the spicy chicken tortilla. And I mean, there were like 3 or 4 days worth of meals there for myself and my family when I did that. And to your point, Brad, these can be amazing. You don't have to eat them every single day. It's been a year since the last time you had this. Find your favorite 50 meals. And then there is like nearly unlimited variety. Do you even remember what you had last year? I mean, it's just, that was so long ago. It's like the first time you've ever had it now. If you build a framework for these types of decisions and you keep it simple, the key is not that you're spending 8 hours making one dinner so that tomorrow you can start over and do it again. Success. It's that you make your life easier and save hundreds of dollars, if not thousands, in the process. Anyways, go to ChooseFI.com/meals. So next I want to switch gears here and I want to talk about the Retirement Savers Credit. Now, MK, the context for this, I believe this came up during the conversation with Sean Mullaney, that live event that we did. Is that accurate?
Correct. So 2 weekends ago, we did a live event with Sean Mullaney, the FI tax guy, and he continues to just blow our mind with new information, even though we think we're all tax pros at this point. He's always giving us great new information. And when he mentioned this, I was watching it live with Jason. And of course, both of us looked at each other like, what? And then you just saw all the comments go like, what?
Slow down. Repeat.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of people were very excited to learn about this. So we really wanted to go in depth on the show. Now you can go back and watch that entire live that we did with Sean to get all the information. If you go to ChooseFI.com/live, anything pre-recorded, you can watch again there, as well as anything coming up. But we're going to go into detail on the Retirement Savers Credit today because we thought this was just too big to not put on the show.
And Brad, I know you're going to kind of break this down, but I wanted to point out the contrast here. I believe, if my like baseline level of understanding is accurate, while last week we spent a lot of time talking about little known Roth hacks and contributions, which were really tailored toward high income earners, how they could still optimize their contributions. The Retirement Savers Credit is a massive perk for individuals that might have, relatively lower incomes. Is that accurate?
Yep, that is accurate. There's certainly adjusted gross income limits here based on this credit. But first, I just wanted to say this is also not just limited, like we were talking last week, to a Roth IRA. So your savers credit, I'm on irs.gov right now, and we'll link this up in the show notes, but it can be taken for your contributions to a traditional or Roth IRA, your 401k, a simple IRA, SARSEP, which honestly I've never heard of before, 403B, 501c18, government 457B.
501c18. What the heck just happened?
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. But anyway, suffice to say, there are lots of options here. So this is applicable for everyone. And essentially, the government is giving you a tax credit. Now, for everybody out there, it's really, really important to know the distinction between a tax credit and a tax deduction. Okay. This is like one of those absolute fundamental pieces of tax knowledge that you just need to have in your head. A tax credit is a dollar for dollar reduction in the amount of tax liability that you owe. Okay. So if you get $1,000 credit, that is $1,000 in your pocket. Okay. Now contrast that with a tax deduction, which just reduces the amount of taxable income you have. Now, whatever marginal rate you're at, let's say you get $1,000 tax deduction, okay? And you are in the 12% tax bracket, right? So you're in the 12% marginal tax bracket, you get $1,000 deduction. That's only worth $120 to you, okay? So contrast a tax credit of $1,000 being worth $1,000 with a tax deduction being worth, in my hypothetical, $120. So needless to say, a tax credit, your eyes should be lighting up when you hear tax credit. This is free money, okay? So in this case, this is for people of relatively lower income, as this is kind of written up, who are able to make contributions to their retirement accounts. It's to help kind of incentivize, let's say. Now, these credits can be up to 50% of your contribution, okay? So if you are married filing joint and your adjusted gross income is not more than $39,000, you get a 50% tax credit. Now, that is up to the maximum contribution that can qualify for the credit is $4,000 if you're married filing joint. So that means the max tax credit is 50% of that, which is $2,000. So that is $2,000 of free money, entirely free money. It reduces your tax liability on your retirement contribution. So guys, so far, does that all make sense?
Yeah, let me try a couple points there. So for individuals with an AGI of 39,000, you can get as much as a 50% contribution. And when you use the word as much, I feel like that's implying some sort of phase out. Is that true?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And yeah, not to get too far into the weeds here, but it's 20% of your contribution if your AGI is $39,001 up to $42,500, then 10% of your contribution if it's up to $65,000, and then naturally 0% of your contribution if your AGI is more than $65,000 if you're married filing joint. So you just don't qualify for this credit.
And Brad, obviously, like this wouldn't be limited to married filing joint. I believe there's some sort of like adjustment based on like head of household. So you have dependents and then also single filers as well.
Yep, that's right. For single, it appears that everything is just in half. So, again, we'll have this linked up in the show notes, but just assume all the numbers we said for married filing joint just cut in half basically on the AGI.
So I want to talk about practical application here and move it off the IRS tables and into someone's life. So the peak level of value here, I'll compare and contrast a married with a single filer. The peak level of value is if you're making, so at AGI, so Brad, correct me if I'm wrong, that's after your 401k deductions, that's when your AGI is produced, right? So whatever you make, contribute to your 401k, minus that contribution, basically that's going to look like your AGI for many people. If your AGI for married filing joint is 39,000, or if your AGI as a single filer is right below 20,000, Brad, very close to that, right?
Yep. 19,500.
Then you get this credit. But how would someone get this credit and what would that mean for them in terms of like money in their hand, basically, right? Are they contributing to a retirement account? What are they doing if their income threshold is below this amount?
Right. So if you're below that 39,000 for married filing joint and you make a $4,000 or more, but 4,000, let's just say, $4,000 contribution to any of those retirement accounts that I previously mentioned, right? Which is pretty much the entire gamut of them, then you qualify for the full credit in this case. Okay. So you make a $4,000 retirement contribution and you get a $2,000 federal tax credit. All right. So your federal tax liability is reduced by $2,000. So it's basically the government saying, okay, here's the incentive. You're getting 50% of that contribution that you made entirely free. It is 100% free. So this is a huge incentive for, in this case, people on the lower end of the income spectrum is what the conceptual basis of this retirement savers credit is. For those people, they get this incentive and it can be massive.
So Brad, you just talked about the difference between a tax credit and a deduction, how a tax credit is not infinitely, very quantifiably more valuable. But I think one other thing that we should mention is refundable tax credit versus a non-refundable tax credit. And this was a realization for me really even this morning as we were prepping.
Yeah, no, there's a huge distinction here. So yeah, even if you guys take in the audience, you take nothing else away from this conversation other than just the difference between a credit and a deduction and a refundable and non-refundable credit. That is huge information. So this retirement savers credit might not be applicable to you, but this is really fundamental information for taxation. So yeah, some tax credits are refundable, which means, let's say for argument's sake, your tax liability was $800 and you had a $2,000 refundable tax credit. Okay. So you would reduce that $800 down to zero, but you'd still have $1,200 of this credit left. The question is, what happens to that? If it's refundable, the federal government actually sends you a refund for that $1,200. Okay. If it's not refundable, what happens is your tax liability is just reduced down to zero. And that's kind of all she wrote in that scenario. So clearly, just like I said, a tax credit is vastly better than a tax deduction. A refundable tax credit is vastly better than a non-refundable tax credit.
And here's why that's important, because, in the last couple of years with the giant tax reform that we had, there were some massive changes made. And the child tax credit was massively kicked up. But okay, That's great. Great that you have that. What about those of us that don't have kids? Is there anything left for us? Yes, let's follow up on that. The Retirement Savers Credit. This is this awesome catch that you have available to you, which is going to give you some of those benefits as long as you know the rules. So, Brad, I'm going to send this back to you. We'll do married filing joint first and then single filers. But for married filing joint, how can they best take advantage of this benefit that's being offered to them by the government?
Yeah, so I was trying to come up with a scenario here of who would be able to take the highest benefit from this, right? And I'm thinking of an ultra FI couple here, right? Who they're making, let's say, $78,000 gross between the two of them, and they are able to max out their 401ks at work, right? So they are able to put away $19,500 each. So 19,500 times 2 is 39,000. Okay. So you took their $78,000 of income, and then there's the deduction, right? Again, deduction from that 78,000. You take away the 39,000 that you just put into your 401k, leaves you with $39,000 of adjusted gross income, which, not surprisingly, is the maximum amount to get this 50% tax credit on that contribution. All right. So, Jonathan, in this case, actually, they would have their $39,000 of AGI. They'd get a $2,000 tax credit, right? But actually, their federal tax liability would be slightly less than that, because they would have their $39,000 of AGI. They'd take out the $24,800 standard deduction, leaving them with a taxable income of $14,200, which is firmly in the 10% bracket. So their federal tax liability would be $1,420. Because they have this $2,000 credit, it wipes their tax liability down to zero. They owe $0 in liability to the government, and they took a $78,000 worth of income and brought it down to zero. So this is a pretty cool example.
So yeah, bravo, okay. And so, Brad, I have two follow-ups here. The first one is just, as we talked about earlier, like this is a phase out. So if individuals find themselves slightly above this, they are not cut off from getting these benefits. It's just going to be in a phase. That was more of a statement, I guess, than a question. But the other question I had is for our single filer friends. This is available for them as well. What would that optimized case study look like for them?
Yeah, for sure. So it appears that it would just be exactly half of what I just described. So yeah, the AGI, the max for them is 19,500. Now, if they started with a gross income of $39,000 and put in the full amount into their 401k, which is 19,500, it would reduce their AGI also to that 19,500, and they would get a 50% tax credit. Now, interestingly, the tax credit maximum for single filers is actually $1,000. Okay. So in this case, they would have 19,500 of AGI. They would take away their standard deduction, which is 12,400 for singles. So this would put them at 7,100 of taxable income. In the 10% bracket, their tax liability would be $710. Again, they had a $1,000 tax credit. That's not refundable, but it brings it down to zero. So nice. Yeah, this is the exact same concept, whether you're single or married filing joint. And yeah, I mean, I think just in summation here, this is a very cool hack for people in the FI community, right? Maybe down the road where you're not making a significant amount of money and you're not obviously hard up for money, like you're continuing to put contributions in for your retirement accounts, and you can maximize this credit, which essentially incentivizes you, right, to continue making contributions, and your federal liability can be dropped to zero or pretty darn close. So yeah, I mean, I think to me, this is a big win, and it's something that even in my experience as a CPA, I had never heard of before. So yeah, I mean, I think we really wanted to bring this to the community, and it's just important for us to know what's out there. What are our options? What's available to people in the FI community that we might not think of? Maybe this wasn't geared towards us when it was drafted up, but if you can benefit from this by doing what is really being asked of here, right? Like even if your income is not significant, but you're continuing to contribute to your retirement accounts, you get to benefit from this credit. And I really like this.
So, Brad, I know you hate it when I keep talking about a topic after you use the word summation.
You have no idea how much I hate when you keep talking.
All right. But this is actually kind of important here. So, two things. One is the optimization that you described was really around reducing your AGI dramatically using your 401k. Now, if you were to contribute to a Roth retirement account or a Roth 401k, the whole point of that is that is not reducing your AGI. Right. And so for individuals, they should be aware when making this choice about, all right, do I want to do a Roth? Do I want a 401k? It may not entirely be what marginal tax bracket you fall into if something like this comes off the table because you didn't reduce your AGI enough to take advantage of it. And then two was, great, it's a hack. How do I do it? Does it just happen automatically? Is this something that's super complicated? I need to talk to my accountant. I believe, from my experience, is if you get your income low enough and you're using some of the more mainstream tax products that are out there like TurboTax, et cetera, you'll immediately see the option to pick this, but you should be watching for it. And this will be one of those bubbles that pops up saying, look how we found ways to save you money.
Yes, they are very, very good at that. And yeah, I suspect strongly this will automatically calculate, but if not, it looks like it goes on federal form 8880. So you just want to look through your tax return and see if that form showed up. And you should see very clearly, it should be on page 2 of the 1040. There should be a line in the payments section that says tax credit. So just keep an eye out. It should be pretty straightforward, but worst case, just go to 8880. That's form 8880.
All right, so let's go ahead and switch gears and bring in feedback from the community, your thoughts, your ideas, your questions, sometimes your criticisms. But before we do that, we'll be right back. All right, and we're back. So I said criticisms there. I'm just kidding. I know you guys always love us all the time, but there was someone that mentioned, hey, by the way, guys, if you could include the data on single filers as well as married filing joint. I hear your criticism. It's valid. I hope you feel like we addressed that today. Moving forward, MK, what do you got for us?
Well, today we had a really great frugal win of the week come in from Bob. So Bob writes, first off, thank you all for your great work. I found your podcast in a particularly difficult time of my life, and it gave me a lot of hope to turn around my family's finances and see a better, more freeing future, which in turn relieved a lot of pressure from other areas of my life. Nice. We have a long way to go, but my wife and I are now building a substantial emergency fund, have cut out spending that doesn't bring value to our lives, and have ditched high-cost service providers in favor of low-cost providers.
Well, there it is.
Second, well, there's a bit more, yeah. So second, he writes, my son has bilateral microtia and atresia, and will be having 2 surgeries in LA toward the end of this year to construct big ears for him. Before listening to your podcast, my wife and I would have had to come up with thousands of dollars out of pocket for 2 sets of round-trip tickets for 3 from DC to LA. Since listening to your podcast, we've begun our travel rewards journey by starting off with Southwest Rapid Rewards Plus card. Each of us opened our own card, first my wife, then myself after she referred me, after spending $5,000 each, of which almost all the spending was on home repairs, initially paid out by insurance for water damage in our home. We will have received a combined initial bonus of 170,000 miles. This will certainly go a long way in helping cover airfare expenses for our upcoming travels to LA. We're also thankful for contributions from family to assist with our trip, but we are very happy we started our own travel rewards path. Bring on the Chase gauntlet. And then he writes, third, if there's anything this lockdown has taught me, it is the importance of financial freedom in designing your own life and bring that true freedom that nothing else can provide. My wife and I both work full-time, and with my 6-year-old son home from school, it is extremely difficult to juggle work and quality time with family. It is very difficult to constantly be telling my child I can't play with him because I have to work 8 hours a day. I know there are many people out there that see this quality time to be had with loved ones, which has to be missed out on because of work obligations. It's truly heart-wrenching at times. If there were no other reason to ChooseFI, this would be enough. Thanks again for all you do. Expect big hugs if we are ever to meet, if you're, of course, huggers and post-COVID.
Post-COVID, huge hugger.
Oh, man. That is incredible. Yes, big hugs all around, Bob. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting to read that, right? He's talking about it being truly heart-wrenching, but it's a hopeful note, right? Like if there were no other reason to ChooseFI, this would be enough, right, MK? I mean, this is what it's all about. Like Bob's saying, like it's the importance of financial freedom in designing your own life. And I think that's really like the essence of what we're all doing here. in the FI community, right? We're designing lives around what we value. And there is so much immense power in that I think a lot of people they miss this. You think like, oh, those people are saving money, they're being misers, all like the negative connotations. But that's not it at all. It's about accruing power on your side of the ledger so you can spend your most precious resource, your time, as you see fit with the people that you love, right? I mean, that is the ultimate luxury in life. It truly is. There's nothing more important. And it's remarkable to see Bob, obviously, that he's using travel rewards points to take these trips that would cost thousands upon thousands of dollars out of pocket. This is obviously, in a scenario where his son needs these surgeries. That, again, it's just reducing stress. That's another thing we talk about. We all live stressful lives. Obviously, having to have 2 surgeries for your 6-year-old son, I can only imagine that is an extraordinarily stressful time. And to take one extra burden out of it, just because you made one decision, right? He said he used his normal spending on these credit cards, earned these bonuses, and was able to take these trips for free. It's these little things. That's what we're doing here. We're not trying to live radically different lives in the FI community. We're just making a series, really dozens or hundreds of these tiny little changes that add up, that compound to something enormous. And it sounds like Bob and his family are just really seeing the power that comes along with that.
I love it. This past week, we also released our episode, speaking of power and coming to your side of the court, we released our episode with the financial mechanic talking about how to negotiate your salary. For audience listening to this, we are going back to numbering our episodes now for your convenience. That was episode 211. So you can access the show notes at ChooseFI.com/211. But I wanted to say that there's so much power to being exposed to this type of information, and also having a community of people to share how they did it, what their experience was, how did it work, how did it not work, what would they do differently to make the conversation easier. In this past episode 211, we were speaking, how to negotiate a higher salary without burning bridges. Jeff in our educators group posted this question, inspired by ChooseFI's recent podcast on how to negotiate for a higher salary without burning bridges. How did you optimize this strategy? So let me just read the first comment that came back. Unfortunately, and this is from Dave, unfortunately, as an educator, I always skip over this topic. We're bound to the teaching scale set by the state. No matter how good or bad of a teacher you are, you slowly climb up the pay scale by years of experience. Okay, we're done, right? But then you have comment after comment of individual that shared how they did it, right? Your belief is you can't negotiate salary. It is what it is. And then Lacey responds almost directly, well, actually, I negotiated up to $15,000 for my opening offer. After that, there's little to no say in the matter, so you might as well start strong. Brian says, Lacey, I did a similar thing, although only for $5,000 instead of $15,000. I was thinking about that conversation while I'm listening to the salary contract negotiation episode this morning. I'm 10 minutes in, and it's probably made me about $40,000 so far. Rob says, things you can do. This is Rob, who actually is the author of The Simple Startup. He's actually helped create our K-12 financial literacy curriculum. He says, all right, well, here's what you can do. And this is dependent on the state. Rob lives in a state with a union. Be active within your union when it comes to negotiating for higher pay scales within the state. Take on extra roles such as coaching, department chair, club advisor, extended learning day. Make sure you're maxed out on the salary scales for education and qualification. The exception may be a PhD, since it doesn't make financial sense in my district to get one. Get your district to hire you during the summer to create resources for them using workshop pay, run a teacher professional development courses. There's comment after comment of how to look at the problem a little bit differently. And we're talking about teachers in this very specific example. And I think teachers and what they're going through is on the forefront of many of our minds right now with this rapidly evolving environment. But what niche are you in? What job industry are you in? What if you could find people in your industry, inside the FI community, that are willing and open to have these conversations? We've talked with many people, Tori Dunlap, we talked with Gene Chatsky, and they say, you don't want to just be flying blind. The key here is to network, foster people that aren't in a direct competition with you. They're pursuing their own journey, maybe in a different part of the state. Maybe they're leaving the company that you're going into, that are willing to say, hey, here's how it works, right? Let me pull back the curtain and share with you how you can get those outsized results. Just because you've written it off currently and say, well, it's just not possible, doesn't mean you're right? You're welcome to your own opinion. You're not welcome to your own facts. That is amazing. As soon as you let go of those preconceived opinions, you open up the door to possibility. I guarantee you there are people in every single position, every single field that have said, well, let's just try it. And if you can do it without burning bridges, you're going to beat the game. And if you're an educator and you want access to this thread, join our educators group on Facebook to access all of our cohort groups. Just go to ChooseFI.com/local. You can find a group of people in your area, or you can find people in an industry or a niche that you happen to be in. And I mean, there's a lot of value to finding other individuals on the path to financial independence whose life reflects your own.
And speaking of Monday episodes, Jonathan, we really loved having Financial Mechanic on. She has a great story. But Jillian over on Everyday Courage had a great guest on her podcast on Monday as well. This guy, his name is Barrett. Have you heard of him? It was a great interview. You should check it out.
He's one of my inner five circle right here. I use my unlimited minutes to get in touch with him.
Yeah, that was fun. That was really a lot of fun. We recorded that a couple months ago, actually in the studio, Jonathan. That was one of the last in-studio recordings. And
I basically gave up on you ever coming back here. Like I had a table here, had your chair reserved, and I was like, that's going to be wild.
There will be a time again. But no, this was a cool interview. I would definitely recommend everybody listen to it. It's short. It's 21 minutes, I think, and it's on communication. And Jillian has this phrase, clear is kind, right? So many of us, when you get asked something, the response is, oh, maybe I can do that. I think I can, maybe someday down the road. Or even you might, in my case, say a resounding yes, but then there were caveats, right? And it leads to friction down the road. And Jillian's contention is being clear is kind. And it's just so important for honest communication, right? And trust, building trust between people. And yeah, I like kind of being the cannon fodder here for the example of how I screwed this up royally. But it was great. I'd highly recommend everybody just kind of check out Everyday Courage. And yeah, it's the most recent episode.
All right. Now, the other episode that we did this week, and I'm only going to spend just a minute on it, is to say that we've kind of gone to this next inflection point in the ChooseFI community story arc here, in that if you think about the first 2+ years of this show, the vast majority of the content that we were highlighting was people that had reached financial independence. How did they do that, right? And the interesting note is ChooseFI for me was always, what am I going to do, right? It was great that it worked for you back then. Does it still work now? I'm going to go on this journey. Brad, you're going to kind of mentor me through this process. Let's do some experiments in financial independence and see what works. And we certainly did that. It works, by the way, spoiler reel for people. But aside from that, we only one time in the early days dabbled with the idea of doing a case study. It was right around episodes 21 through 25, some of the Friday roundups. We attempted to do our first case study with Paul. And just from a production perspective, I was working as a pharmacist at the time, full-time, trying to fit this in nights and weekends. It was a podcast only. We had to schedule our events. We only had very limited bandwidth to record. So it was a long ordeal to try to do an interactive process back and forth. We finished one and were like, okay, we're going to park that idea for a bit. Circa 2020, we decided to take another stab at it, in part, Brad, because you have been lobbying for this idea, let's go back to case studies. I want to do case studies. Let's go back. You've been asking for it for quite literally 8 months. I think 8 months was the first time I heard you mention it. Yeah. And this past week on Wednesday, we rolled out the first one of those. And I think that was an awesome episode. It was so much fun. And I think it was really just us piloting the process, and it's going to keep getting better from here. But I think I would love, Brad, to hear your perspective on why the case studies are a huge inflection point for the community.
Yeah, I think it really is critically important, right? I think so many people, like we've talked about over and over again, they see themselves in people's stories. They can imagine that, oh, that person is similar to me. If they're doing it, I can do it too, right? And if they're going through those struggles, if they're having those issues, I am too sometimes, right? And if they can take action to make their lives better, maybe I can too. And I think there's just great power in that, of seeing someone go through it with you. There's also, and this is not to discount, obviously, the hundreds of interviews that we've done, Jonathan. I'm not saying they were not of great value, because they certainly were. But it's one thing to have someone who's reached financial independence look back and say, with the benefit of hindsight and maybe some cognitive biases of particular things that jump out, oh, this is how I did it, right? That's all well and good. But it's another thing to say, this is what I'm struggling with now. I need some help. And I think there is massive value for the huge percentage of our audience who's just getting started on this path, and they don't know if they can do it. Well, you and I and MK, we are committed on this show to having these case studies. We have a couple coming out the next couple Wednesdays, and MK, I think we have a whole series lined up.
Yes. So way back in the beginning of the year, we kind of put out a call for people to be part of this. We called it a documentary series for no better word than it's going to be, case studies, and it's going to be continued to follow people. And so we have our households lined up. I think for alliteration's sake, we called it FI families. And then we were like, well, not everybody is a family. Some people are single. So FI households works, but you don't have to live in a house. You can live in a condo or an apartment or a van or wherever. So we have some really great case studies that are going to be coming out with these individuals and couples who've applied and agreed to be part of this to kind of share their finances and the struggles that they're going with. So the case studies that are coming up in the next few weeks are going to be, very singular, helping people where they are in a point in time. But I'm really excited for this docu-series that we're going to have going, just to follow people to say, okay, we're going to do a case study and give you advice. And then how did that turn out? Did that work? Did that succeed? Or was that a total flop? And how can we pivot and help to get you there too? So I'm excited just because my fresh to FI phase has totally worn off. Jason and I have been on this path for 6+ years now. So we forget what it was like the first time that you learned about, tax loss harvesting or some of these other beneficial things. Like we forgot the joy of like, wait, what? You can do that? So it's really exciting to relive that excitement with the people who are going to be part of these case studies moving forward, to kind of feel that like inspiration towards FI again.
All right. Well, we will update you. And truly, this is a crowdsourced show. We want your involvement as well, right? I mean, we're going to have people with unique obstacles, certain career paths, certain things that they're getting stuck on. We're going to stretch it out potentially over a series of weeks, and we're going to be doing follow-ups. There's a real opportunity for us as a community to crowdsource this information and to help, provide the information that serves people where they are. And we'll do our best to kind of bring in the floor of information that we've learned up to this time. But you may finally have that spark that says, I have something that would be beneficial in this case study. We're going to provide a way for you to lean into this conversation as well. So thank you for joining us today. And thank you for being with us on this journey. The fire is spreading, my friends. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to ChooseFI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.